Greetings and welcome. We're so glad that you have joined us for the Indigenous Artist Gathering tonight. This is Mina Malik speaking on behalf of the Cultural Equity Learning Community Core Team, calling in from the traditional lands of the Kizh, Gabrielino, and Tongva peoples, colonially known as Torrance, California. There is an image of the CELC logo with a black background and white writing that spells out Cultural Equity Learning Community. There are 4 diagonal lines to the left of the writing, also in white. Today's discussion and the CELC more holistically are made possible by incredible project partners and sponsors. This includes Arts Connect International, the Anti-Racism Collaborative, the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, the Boston Foundation, Artists Thrive, an initiative of the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation, the Cambridge Community Foundation, the Cambridge Arts Council, Mass Humanities, the New England Foundation for the Arts, Foley Hoag Foundation, Arts Boston, Creative Generation, Boston Art Review, Deidre Montgomery Consulting, Kiesel Consulting, Mina Malik Consulting, Elisa Lyles Zampanza Consulting, and Marion Taylor Brown Consulting. This slide presents the various logos of the project partners. Today's conversation features Indigenous leaders Lily E. Manycolors, Sharon Day, Martha Redbone, and Tammy Haile Opua Baker. In their conversations with each other, they will share about their work in the arts, as well as what they envision for their future. This slide contains photographs of the 4 Indigenous arts leaders, Lily E. Manycolors, Sharon Day, Martha Redbone, and Tammy Haile Opua Baker.
Hi, everyone. My name is Martha Redbone. I'm Southeastern Afro-Indigenous. I am Cherokee, Shawnee, and Choctaw, an African-American. And I was raised in Appalachia, in the mountains called Black Mountain, which is in Kentucky. And I come from a coal mining family, a long line of coal miners. And then I was moved to New York City to live with my mom as a middle schooler. And so I feel like I have the mountains and the city in part of my blood and in the music that I make. And what else can I tell you? I'm not sure if I'm doing the right description, but I am living in Brooklyn, New York, in New York City, and I am known for my very long braids, which I love, African braids, which they call Senegalese twists. And I'm wearing glasses today because I can't see the details without it. The music that I do is a combination of the blues, Afro-Indigenous blues, which comes from the Gulf Coast and the people that I'm from, my grandfather's people who are Choctaw. There's a big community of Afro-Indigenous people throughout history, and the sounds of the musics that come from both peoples are, to me, what has created the blues. And I incorporate that with also the language of my Cherokee Shawnee grandmother. And I felt it was very important in my work, and also not only in my work but in my life, to celebrate these cultures, because I grew up in a time when being multicultural, you were forced to choose, and it's so interesting because I felt that I was very much alone in this until I started to travel. I thought it was just our family that struggled with anti-Blackness and marginalization of being Indigenous, and especially on the East Coast, where we sometimes are faced with a lot of derogatory remarks and criticisms and assumptions and things. And so I wanted to share in my music, first and foremost, number one, that we are still here. And instead of feeling negative about the disparaging things, I wanted to celebrate our resilience as a peoples, as Afro-Indigenous peoples. We have a lot to offer. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot that was stolen from us um, and erased on paper, erased in our language, and laws placed against both sides of my family, the African American and the Indigenous. And so for me, I feel it's very important now that I'm a mom. I want to have this information and have it be something to be proud of, so that I can pass it on to my grandchildren. So I'm a mother right now of a 12-year-old and who is very much aware of his culture and aware of our community back home and very much connected. And I feel that the music keeps us connected. I can share some footage at a later time, video footage of the songs that we sing, the social dances that we share and that we teach, not only to Indigenous peoples in New York City schools, but also back home and also in the Gulf Coast, where I teach for the Department of Indian Education. And I've also curated a Southeastern traditional music component with Carnegie Hall, and that was something that they had never had before, and they also learned a lot about Native American culture. Number one, first and foremost, that it's just not one culture. So anyway, I think that's all I have to say right now. And I'm grateful and honored to be here and to learn from all of you as well. And I'm a huge fan of uh, Sharon Day. I just want to say that I love her dearly. I love her work, and I love her story. So that's it.
Nagamo Maingan and Dishnakas, Wabashashi and Dodem, Ojibwe Kwe and Down, Dishnesia Madeo, Madewana Kwe and Dow. In English, I said, my name is Singing Wolf. I'm an Ojibwe woman. I'm from the Martin clan, Wabashashi clan, and our job is to protect the people. I'm second degree Madewan. Madewan in English translates into the Grand Medicine Society, although a more a better way to describe it is the path of the heart way. And I'm also Made Wanakwe, which is one of the water women in our lodge some years ago. They lifted 7 or 8 of us up at that time to be the head water women, although we are all water women. And I'm sitting here looking out the window, and I live on 40 acres in this area. It's kind of a chain of lakes near the St. Croix River. And St. Croix is the river that divides Minnesota and Wisconsin. And then I lived for 30 years in a little house near the Mississippi, about a block from the Mississippi in St. Paul. And I moved to this farm about 8 months ago. And I bought this land. I have 40 acres, and I have a couple of goats and chickens and dogs. And also there are some elevated deer stands. They're like tree houses on either end of the 40 acres. And we're repurposed them as art and meditation centers. And I think this land where I am right now sort of is a good metaphor for my life. I I never considered myself to be an artist until I was about 40 years old. And but I was one of those kids in school who would sit and stare out the window and supposed to draw something, and I was ended up being this little square house, you know, like with a little picket fence. It was the only thing I could draw. And and but because of the need for stories and the need to keep people alive, um, in 1990, I started a youth theater ensemble, and the purpose was to keep our young people alive. At that time, people were dying from AIDS, and we lost so many artists and so many of our people then. And I wanted to make sure that our youth survived, and so I created this ensemble, and I invited Spider Woman Theater to come and work with us, and they did, and that relationship has continued over these 30 years. And you know, in 1998, we were going to do we had a event for the National March on Washington, and we didn't have any musicians to sing, and so I told everybody, me and my sisters could sing. And then, of course, I had to go tell my sisters that I wanted them to sing at this LGBT fundraising event. And of course, they said yes. And they said, but we only sing in ceremony. And I said, well, yeah, but how hard can it be to learn a couple 49s? And so we did. And I've been singing ever since, and wrote most of our songs, and write a lot of the songs that we use on the water walks today. And so all of my art has came about because of a necessity to tell a story, to protect the people, to create an image, to touch people's hearts and minds. And this land here, so far we've had, in the short time I've been here, we've had a retreat for elders. We took 3 men in our community and we put them out an overnight fast in the tree houses and down by the lake. And we have youth coming up here to work on the farm. And the only reason I bought the goats was because the kids wanted them, and the youth that we work with, the teenagers we work with. And so, but you know, they're little escape artists, and they keep me moving and busy. And you know, I think, yeah, it's a perfect example of how my life has been. And my father was a musician, and he would always sing to us, tell us stories. And everybody in my family are also singers. You know, my nephews sing with the boys, and all these different the dancers at powwows. So, you know, um, so art isn't so much, you know, these narrowly defined. I'm a musician. I'm a writer. It's sort of integrated into everything that we do, and um, and out of necessity to keep our culture alive. Thank you. Should I pass it on to somebody? Um, how about I'm going to go back to
Halito, Hotsochifayet, Gisis Navagisis. I am, so it's always hard to describe what I am in terms of colonial ethnic labels. But I am a mixed Choctaw, African American, and Anglo-Australian. I introduced myself in Choctaw, but my name was given to me in the Anishinaabe traditions by an Anishinaabe person, which is it's a great honor to carry a name in Ojibwe Moen. Yeah, I am an artist. I have been making since I figured out I had hands, like children when they have that moment, they realize like, oh, I can do things with these things. I've been making things ever since. Currently, I am a painter, I guess you could say. I make these huge paintings, and I'm a performance artist. My work very much aggressively takes up space in colonial environments. And yeah, I'm a mom, which definitely altered my whole life and kind of gave my work focus. And my work really is I'm just constantly striving for liberation against trauma and oppression and colonialism. And I am and yeah, it's really hard work. It's hard work, I think, often because I experience being alone a lot and lonely, which I'm realizing is part of the illusion that colonialism feeds, is this separateness. I'm currently in grad school, kind of considering why I thought that was a good idea in a pandemic as a single mom, homeschooling my kid. But I'm in grad school I'm in a program that's allowing me to really my studies in decolonialism, which is actually quite violent because of the extractive nature, at least that I've experienced. I was born and raised in Australia, and I moved to Turtle Island when I was 13. I met my father. So I have a lived experience of having two selves, being born and raised in the other. I literally can't get farther away from where I was born than where I live now. I have to go to the moon. It's like living on the opposite sides of the planet, which has been a very interesting experience to unravel. And being raised in a really colonial environment that was totally colorblind. I think was a valid experience, though it was creating. And so I find myself now in this time of being a person of multiple selves and reconciling how to do that in a world that demands a binary, even though I think that world is changing and shifting. Yeah, so I'm work is I find my work to be kind of a brave and but also inspiring tenderness. My performance art is after I do it. I always am a little bit shocked. But yeah, I think my work very much is I'm striving to feel a sense of longing and connection and share with others. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right, mahalo. Wai puna lau ke aloha e nā hoa maka maka. Mai nā kai e walu o ko Hawaii pai aina a hiki loa aku I ka aina o nā oiwi Amerika. A puni ka honua hoi. Aloha mai kākou. I am Haile Opua Baker. I hail from the rich lands of Hawaii in our Hawaiian archipelago. My genealogy connects me to the island of Oahu, where I currently reside, and the island of Kauai, where I was raised. My current practice now is as a playwright and director, also a performer at times. I started as a performer, as a hula dancer when I was a young girl. And over the years, I was introduced to other performing arts that since time immemorial, my people, the Kanaka Maoli, have practiced. Various types of storytelling, various types of composition and expression through music, through chant, through song and poetry. And as I got older and entered high school, I learned theater. And it wasn't until my early adult years that I was able to partake in Hanakiaka, or Hawaiian medium theater. And Hawaiian medium theater is our primary form that we work in now. We look at theater, Hanakiaka, as a means to empower Kanaka Maoli, a means to empower our identity, and it's a tool for raising consciousness, as well as a tool for language revitalization. And so much of my work in the past couple decades has really been in using Hanakiaka in curriculum to teach language and to promote language and cultural fluency. In this form of Hanakiaka, there are 4 primary pillars to Hanakiaka. And I'll just share those pillars really quickly and see where this goes. We have first and foremost mo'olelo. Mo'olelo is storytelling. It is also our history. It's who we are. Mo'olelo is really a major component of who Kanaka Maoli are and where they stem from. The second pillar in Hanakiaka is ku'auhau, and ku'auhau is our genealogy. So we see that in all of our work, we are genealogically connected to the land or the individuals, the ancestors that we portray. And even when we look at doing works that project forward, there is still that ku'auhau that lays the foundation for us. The other kukulu of Hanakiaka is what we term as hana no'eo. And hana no'eo are various types of performing arts and visual arts. So they're the utilitarian art, and then they're also the cultural expressive arts. So within Hanakiaka, we employ various types of hana no'eo to tell our stories and to express heightened communication, perhaps, in the storytelling process. One of our great scholars, Mary Kavena Pukui, said that no legend or no story was complete without song or without chant. So we know that every story that is told has to have mele or oli to communicate that story completely, because that is at the very core of who we are as a people. That is how we express ourselves. The final kukulu, or the final pillar of Hanakiaka, is olelo. And olelo is our language. So when we look at this form, those 4 kukulu are necessary elements in the composition of Hanakiaka. Currently, we have been able to establish and institutionalize the teaching of Hanakiaka and the production of Hanakiaka at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which allows for regular productions for students to take part in. And it also opens the door of our theater to really do something to produce works that is relevant to our community and honors the mo'olelo of our land. This program, Hawaiian Theater Program, has also created opportunities for students to study something that they may not have had the chance to study. And we notice with our Kanaka Maoli students that in engaging in this kind of work, there is a self-confidence, there is an embracing of language and identity that strengthens them as people. And so my hope is that we continue to promote Kanaka Maoli perspectives, Kanaka Maoli worldview, epistemologies and ontologies as a means to decolonize and as a means to empower our identity as Kanaka Maoli and to reinforce Kanaka Maoli consciousness. Mahalo for this opportunity to be here, to engage and share space with the many talented Indigenous artists. I am honored to be a part of this conversation, and me oko ko'u aloha. Mahalo.
Before moving into the remainder of the conversation, our speakers offer an image description for our audience.
Halito, my name's Lily. I'm wearing a very coarse but cozy black and gray sweater. My hair is a strange result of natural brown and failed dyed attempts. My skin is buckskin color, pre-dyed or smoked. I have on black, gray, and red beaded earrings that were gifted to me.
I think I mentioned before, I'm wearing a black t-shirt. It comes from Reclaim Your Power website. And it says, strong, resilient, Indigenous, Anichishkawa, which is our clan. And I mentioned before my very long black braids that are all twisted up. And sometimes the kids really love playing in it because it says it reminds them of a mermaid. And I really love the thought of being from the water world. I am Afro-Indigenous. I am the color of Haagen-Dazs coffee, ice cream, and I'm seated. I'm sitting on my nice, squishy, falling apart gray sofa, and behind me is a very beautiful mask, African mask. And yeah, that's it. No makeup. Oh, these earrings though are really awesome. I'm wearing earrings that are made of quahog shell, and they were made from my friend's dad from Shinnecock, who is a fisherman, and he also manages the Shinnecock Museum. And so he makes these, and these are funny earrings because it's from the center of the quahog shell. And sometimes kids think that they're little tiny little horns like like deer baby, like mini deer antlers. And so I said that would really be a really tiny little deer if it were, you know. So those are the earrings that I some of my favorite earrings, and I have like a bunch of them. And he goes fishing and then he comes back and he sits on the porch and makes these. So if you're ever in Shinnecock in the summer months, you have to go to the Shinnecock Museum and he'll be right there sitting on the porch making these earrings.
I am sitting on my four-season porch, which is also my office, and I have my hair used to be black, and now it's pretty much gray. And I'm a Ojibwe woman, grandmother, 69 years old, and I have brown skin, and I think that's about it. I'm very, very cute. For a granny.
I would agree, very, very cute. Okay, this is my first attempt, but I was watching those tutorial videos of how they do this. So, so I'm Haile Opua Baker. I'm a light-skinned Kanaka Maoli woman who's a little tan. I would be more tan if I was at the beach more often. I'm wearing a fuchsia and hot pink Sig Zane dress. And I have long, dark brown hair. I think that's me. Oh, yeah, I'm wearing glasses. That's right. I'm wearing glasses because I'm blind without them. And oh, behind me is a bookshelf. It's a bookshelf of knowledge, yeah, that I hold dearly because it's, you know, important for us to continue to broaden ourselves, our understanding. And even though it's a Western technology, we have embraced it as Indigenous peoples to document everything that once was passed down orally. Yeah, we are now fiercely putting things on paper. And that's part of our empowerment as well, right? So that we start to write our stories and we start to reclaim our histories and produce texts. Yeah, there's a double standard. We don't have to go into that, but our Indigenous knowledge is not normally recognized, right? If it's not on paper, then it doesn't exist for the white, the majority white. I'll just say that, sorry.
One of my final papers was on the issue of, no, it wasn't on this issue. It was pushing against and resisting the issue of the archive and what is considered valid knowledge within a white racialized world. And I don't know how I got to grad school. Like, I don't know why they let me in. I dropped out at 16. I went to 17 different schools. Like, I still can't do math at all in any sense. But I wrote this paper, and I wrote it based on this sculpture I did in the fall. I was doing an artist residency for the Boston Center of Arts, and my work partner was like, I need some wood. I've never worked with wood in this way before, but you know, creator gave me this image and I have to do it. And he found in the most, spirit-led way, this 300-year-old Nipmuc slab. So this tree, a slab of this tree is a slab of black oak that lived in Nipmuc territory for 300 years. So it lived with his ancestors. And then we get it. He and these three men, I had a cute outfit on, so I wasn't going to carry the wood up floor flights of stairs. So these three gentlemen carried this 250-pound slab of wood up 4 flights of stairs. And we get in the studio, and my partner and I, we look, and there's a watermark, but it's the face of an ancestor. And then I spent like days carving, sitting with this I'm gonna call this tree Matuk, because it's Nipmuc. Matuk means wood, or tree, excuse me. Matuk means tree in Nipmuc. So I sat with this Matuk in the studio in downtown Boston, one of the most colonized like places, and like just the records of life, and so Western thought, Western ways of thinking says that the archive is like the only valid form of knowledge, right? But here's this relative, this 300-year-old relative with an ancestor coming through its flesh, like, hey, guess what? I know all the secrets of all the humans that ran through my lands for 300 years. And I'm just like, first of all, I'm so humbled. I cried a lot with that piece. And then second of all, I just find myself in this place of like, oh, how do I reconcile these like opposing forces? And the image that I sculpted into the flesh of this Matuk was a mother and her daughter, and their backs are to us. And so they're moving into the future, guided by this ancestor. The image of the ancestor being presented through these watermarks, they told me what to carve. I was like, okay, I'm just gonna be the tool. And then when I was painting them, the mother is a little more light skin and the daughter is darker skin. And then it lived for a moon cycle in downtown Boston. And it's like all these people who like, we installed it during Sunday brunch time, it's just like a bunch of natives putting this like old relative who isn't even that old in the time frame of the earth. It just, so this paper I wrote was very much like, how can you possibly accept that these Western vaults of learning and knowing are ever going to be adequate? My elders say that no knowledge is useless, so you have to find a place for it. But yeah, I don't know. I literally just finished my semester, so I'm so in it. I'm just like, what? How? Yeah, how? But I'm also very aware of the privilege that I have of having professors who would even engage with me writing something like that, like challenging the validity of research, challenging that like what's considered real knowledge. So I appreciate you bringing that up. It feels very, very poignant in my life right now.
Mahalo for sharing that beautiful story. We walk with our ancestors daily. They are around us and they inform us. They're in the wind and in the water and in the earth and in the clouds. And there's so many levels of communion, I think, with our kupuna. We call them kupuna, our ancestors. They guide us. They guide every step of our feet, and they also, in my experiences, guide every word that goes on the page. When we are creating new theater, it's because of them that we have vision of what to create, right? The melodies and the tunes that come when we're arranging and composing, and the words, it's because of them. They are guiding and feeding us that knowledge. And so I see myself as a vessel, a tool, a vessel to retell these stories, and to create works that communicate on multiple levels. So it's not just the words that are being said, it's not just the dances that are happening, it's beyond the physical. There is an emotional and a spiritual level to this work that, reaches out into our audience and gives them the opportunity to reconnect with this material as well, and reconnect with our ancestors. So the story you just shared about the wood, we've had similar things happen to us with stones and also with clouds, where stories unfold and there's images there that inform us how to move forward. So yeah, that very much resonates with me and our culture here in Hawaii. So mahalo for sharing that.
Yeah, that brings to mind to me, I wrote a musical last year, and it'll be produced in May. But 2017, I think we walked the Missouri River, and we started in Montana, and we went all the way down to St. Louis. And I invited 5 women to go with me the whole way, and one woman was Lori Watso from Shakopee, somebody I've known for 40 years. And another woman is a singer, songwriter, a white woman, Sarah Thompson from Superior. And so we started off, and Lori had told us a story about her grandmother, who was one of the Dakota. She was her great grandmother was a young woman when the Dakota were exiled from Minnesota, and as it turns out, Sarah's great grandmother came here from Norway in 1862 because of the famine in Norway, and so we're walking, and we'd been walking for about a month by the time that we got to, maybe longer, by the time we got to Crow Creek, South Dakota. And Crow Creek was where they put all the Dakota people that they had exiled on a barge, and they sent them to Crow Creek, 3,000 people. And Lori's grandmother was on that barge. And when the barge got to Crow Creek, they just let them off there. And there was no village, nothing there. I mean, there was no, it's like being dropped off in the middle of the prairie. And the government sent a wagon full of food, but by the time the wagon got there, it was empty because the men had sold the food along the way. So we approached Crow Creek, and there's a woman there, Ramon, I think her name was. She came to meet us, to walk with us. And as we approached Crow Creek, American Creek, which is a tributary of the Missouri, right where Crow Creek is, the village of Crow Creek, she told us this story about, this is where they dropped the people off. And she talked to us about some other things. And we knew some of that because we had these 2 women with us. Well, by the time we got to St. Louis, I knew that somehow I had to chronicle all the things that happened. I mean, we walked through so many territories, and of course, every sign we seen along the way were these 2 white men, pointing, this way. And of course, that was Lewis and Clark, who were just, men who were trying to find a way and would never have survived had it not been for all the tribes along the way and Sacagawea, who introduced them to people. She was the kind of the ambassador. Anyhow, by the time we got to St. Louis, there was such a bond between everybody. And of course, we walked through Standing Rock, and we'd all been at Standing Rock before the year before. And when we got done, Lori said, what happened on this walk, forgiveness is not a big enough word to hold, to contain what happened. And these two, how could that even happen? Two women whose great-great-grandmothers were in the same place in 1862, both exiles, right? One from Norway and one being exiled from their home. And Lori's great-great-grandmother went up to Canada, and then she came back down and ended up back in Minnesota. But I think, to me, like to tell that story, like with the wood, like you have to tell the story. And it's not just to chronicle what happened in the past, but as a message to what we need to do in the future. How do we, there's so much talk about, historical trauma. And what I like to say to people is, we're not here today because our ancestors were so downtrodden and they felt so much pain and they were just simply survived. No, we're here because when they picked that first strawberry and they tasted that first strawberry and they tasted the juice and the, odamen, the word for heart is ode. When they tasted that first berry and the sweetness of that and the sweetness they had for each other, that is why we're here today. And so they sent that sweetness, that love forward. And just like I have to believe that these two great-great-grandmothers sent something forward, that these two women would meet and become sisters.
Yeah, Koke, for sharing that story. That feels really helpful for me. It's really violent for me being in grad school. The academic institution is built for white supremacy, to maintain white supremacy. And every day in class, I do some type of harm. And to be reminded of, like, I come from a long line of people who prioritize that sweetness. Yeah, thank you for that. And it's really kind of changing the way I've been. I can't stop thinking about this 400-year cycle we're on. 400 years ago, the Pilgrims, they started doing their building the foundation here, and how we're like going through that portal. We're like back at the same place in the circle, just at a different level. And yeah, there's a lot of hate and anger that I've experienced in myself and outside of myself this year, and being reminded of, we're about to start a whole new cycle, and what foundation do I want to lay for my child and my descendants? And getting lost in the, I think like um, I think that there's like a part of being a warrior that has been forgotten, that is actually about love, and care. Care takes that warrior nature. Yeah, I'm like, how do I do that and protect my heart and protect the sweetness? Yeah, wow, thank you.
I was thinking, you know, the way that our lives, all of us, our lives are, and you know, having to live in the present world as we are in order to create our work, and the things that, you know, we have to do that are not part of where we come from and who we are, our ways, and it is super challenging, and using this language, even using the language that of English, you know, where one word means 3 or 4 different things, and you don't always understand what people are saying, and when you try to explain to this, you know, kind of westernized way, it's so different. They just, you know, I find, you know, working with some of the, you know, institutions that you know, that I literally am speaking a completely different language that they just do not understand, especially when it comes to songs and music, and you know, the storytelling. These are things people love. People love the concept of the storytelling from the Indigenous perspective. You know, they love that. They can sit around and hear our stories all day long, but do they really hear the stories? Do you know what I mean? You know, and you know, and it's the same thing with you know, like I say, okay, you know, here we're gonna sing a, you know, okay, we're gonna sing a war dance song, you know, war dance, or we're gonna do this is a, you know, a social dance or something, and they did not understand that the song is a dance and the dance is a song, you know. God, that was really hard to explain, you know. It just seemed to take forever, you know. And also things like, you know, they want, you know, want to ask me to go to the piano, and what key is it in? I said it's whoever the leader is. They were like, yeah, okay, I understand, but what key is it in? Like, where's the note on the piano? I was like, piano, there ain't no piano. You know. But just not understanding that, and they're saying, well, how can we teach the kids that? I said, I teach it to them. I said, do this. You know. No, but I mean, but when you're not here, like, how can we teach them? I said, you know, can you teach the teachers to teach them? I said, yeah, I can. Oh, how you do that? I said, just do this. Repeat after me. They could not understand that. Man, we went around and around the houses so many times. Finally, I just had to go to the dang piano and give them some freaking notes, you know. Yeah, well, it's around here, you know. And so if your leader, you know, if your leader is a, you know, a 24-year-old school teacher, you know, and she's whatever, she'll say, you know, you sing like this. Da, 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 da. I said, and if your teacher's, you know, an 80-year-old, you know, man, he'll be, you know, it'll be whatever it is, you know. but just having to articulate that is so difficult. They just don't understand what our storytelling and what our songs are about. They just don't understand it. And and even like the idea of writing things down, I'm wondering, like, just for myself, and it's funny, Lily, thank you for sharing what you've said, and also sharing everyone for what you contributed, because everything that you said has really resonated with me. And and back home we say, that our trees hold all the stories, so these trees have seen generations of everything. They can tell you everything that has gone on because they're just sitting there watching, and so and we feel like this is how it is. You don't even you don't, it's not like a kind of British recipe book where it's like half a teaspoon of this and a tablespoon of that, and it's not like that. We that's just not how we talk. And every time we get together, we share our stories, and the bigger the occasion, the more stories that you learn as we go along. You have, if there's a birthday party, then then the family gets together and all the cousins comes. If there's a death of an elder, then you get more people coming together, and everybody's cooking and everybody's telling stories and sharing and giggling, and you learn every single time, and it's just something that's ever growing and that's handed down. And as the kids are running around underneath you, and then the next time the kids are a little older, and then all of a sudden those kids are sitting at the table, handing off the swatches to make the star quilt, or making the dough for the bread, or somebody stirring the beans, or whatever it is. It just does it. It's just something that is always happening, no matter what. And it's those kinds of things are really difficult to write down. And I almost sometimes wonder if for me, if writing it down is a way for it to be taken away from us, and if that's not some of the things, like for example, at home, like I'm the storyteller, for our community. My grandma was a storyteller. My mom was a storyteller. Now I'm the storyteller, but there are only certain stories that we were allowed to tell outside of our community. So those are the ones we tell the white people. When we do our, events and things like that, public events that are like not in our homelands, and those are the ones that you see like all the time when you're like on YouTube, and you see it's always the same ones that are going around, because those are the ones that we can, all right, let them take that, you know what I mean? And I think that that's our way, it's just who we are. I'm rambling now, but I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, because I think all of you understand what I'm trying to say. But it's not easy to communicate,
No,
with people.
it's not.
Yeah.
I had a couple classes this semester where this non-Indigenous person, I said that I don't identify as being human, and he could not handle that. Were you saying Indigenous people aren't human beings? I was like, bro, go read some race laws, okay? Like, Indigenous people weren't allowed to be classified in the Western sense as humans. And I don't know if I want to be part of that anyway. But the issue that came up, which ultimately was entitlement to knowledge. This, like, I'm entitled to know. It's like, okay, but if you are present and you hear what is being said, are you actually going to understand what's being said? Is your brain ready to process what's being said? And I think what you're speaking to is one of the founding issues of the dominant culture of the country is this entitlement to know, instead of building a relationship to knowledge, which will allow you to understand when you're ready. I struggle with this with my daughter. I'm like, oh no, am I like exposing her to something that is she ready for? How do I tell if she's ready? I don't know. Yeah, this entitlement to knowledge. And I think there's, in my own experience, there are things that I wish I hadn't been told. I was not ready. And yeah, my professors are always asking me like, okay, well, how are you going to protect what you're saying? And so, yeah, navigating this world that I think is changing. But how to get people to understand, like, you're not entitled to anything. I mean, life is a gift, and the body you're in, this body, that's borrowed too. Like, how? Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate you saying.
I want to piggyback on what you just shared right there, Lily, because I think one of the largest challenges in the academia, in the in Western institutions, is that entitlement and the belief that is perpetuated that knowledge is free for anyone to consume. And for us, as in, I can say for us as Kanaka Maoli, we have knowledge that is sacred and protected. And I think most Indigenous peoples will be able to kind of validate this. We have knowledge that is secular and knowledge that is sacred. And so really kind of divide, like walking that line and letting students know that Ike, right, knowledge is not Noah. It is not for everyone's consumption. And there are certain forms of Ike that are kapu. They are set aside for particular individuals or particular families. And to get them to understand that, and to even get my colleagues to understand that, is difficult. It's very challenging because they are used to being able to consume whatever they want. Like the premises of study in the Western institution is to choose a subject that you want to become an expert in, right? So they choose a subject, they pursue that subject, they usually go far away from home, right? So that when they come back, they are the expert. Yeah, it's a very different process. For us, we are selected by our elders if we are able to learn certain things, right? So kind of walking in those two worlds can be very challenging, because when we share things, people don't understand that there are processes and protocols connected to that sharing. So whether it's a song or a dance or a chant or a story even being told, there are processes that are put in place that we need to adhere to, that we need to be accountable for. I can't just get up and dance a hula for you, right? It comes from, right, a genealogy. It comes from a long practice that was before me and before my mother, before my grandmother, before even her grandmother. And so if I get up on a stage, yeah, I have to make sure that it's okay for me to embody that I have done the necessary protocol, and have that kind of release from my kumu, right, to dance those things. And so there's certain things that it's cultural knowledge and cultural fluency that's nearly impossible to communicate, and I'll just share one quick anecdote. I was at an event, and I was being asked to get up and dance. So here's an example. Go and dance a hula for us. And I said, no, thank you for the invite, but no, thank you. I'm not able to do that right now. And this individual in the group that I was with did not understand why I couldn't go up. But the reason why I couldn't go up is because I wasn't wearing a dress. I was wearing jeans, I was wearing pants. And in the tradition that I was trained in, you don't dance unless you can have a skirt on, right? So for me personally, it's not that I don't remember it or I can't do it, but it's just, I know if I don't have like a pareo, right, or something to wrap around myself to get up and dance, then I would be disrespecting that lineage that I was taught. And so and people don't get it. They don't understand that these practices are linked to deep levels of knowledge and learning and traditions and ritual practice. So yeah, all of what has just been shared very much resonates with me. It's a challenge that we walk through day in and day out. We always have to explain ourselves. And sometimes we don't want to explain ourselves. Sometimes I just want to say, it's like that, and it's just like that. So sorry, but that's how it is.
I completely, I mean, you're explaining all of our lives. I think one of the things that this whole thing boils down to is the lack of respect. It's as simple as that, because we're still objectified. They still see us as these, relics of the past and objects of entertainment, and not human, not on equal level. They see us as less than, that we can poke and prod and take pictures of us all day long and look at us and say, hey, show us that thing you do, and I think and when you say, I don't thank you for the invitation, but no, thank you. Well, why not? That's a lack of respect. That's the only thing that is. Why not? What do you mean, why not? And I think that that's what it boils down to still at the end of the day. We're there, we're invited to participate, but then at the same time, we're still supposed to be of service to them in a way that they don't respect when we're if we decline, or however it is, on our terms. We're not allowed to ever have our terms. And this is why we're discussing these things today amongst each other, because this has to be, this movement of going forward, of basically, no, this is who we are, this is our ways, and it's because we said so. You know what I mean?
I think it's also because they, there's this just, like, well, what is knowledge and how does, and I think most people in this country think that knowledge is something that you study and you collect it in your brain and that's it. And how do you move things forward? Yesterday, when we were up at the Line 3 event, one of the women who had helped organize that asked me a question at the end of the day, like, what should we do to change public opinion about Line 3? How do we get people to understand really that water is life and that we have to protect the water? And so I said, well, I think, the event like you did today, where people are in their bodies, they're walking, they're singing, there's people are moving, that's a good way for people to learn. And then this, this older white man said, well, what kind of information do we give them, and how can we really stop this and turn this around? And I said, like at Standing Rock, the day that Obama made his decision that there had to be this whole environmental impact study done, there were thousands of people at Standing Rock, and everybody was there. And then there was a small group of Madewans, and Josephine Mandaman had brought this Thunderbird egg, and she had a message, that letter that came with it, and it was given to her, and she was told to take it to Standing Rock. And she said, I think it should go in the Missouri River. And so there were discussions all day about it, just among us, like 12 Madawan that were there. Nobody even knew we were there, right? All this other stuff was going on over there. And after all this deliberation, I said, may I speak? And the chief said, please do. And I said, I think that Thunderbird egg needs to go in the Cannonball River, because where they call it the Cannonball River, because right at where the camp was, there used to be a place where the water swirled around, and that swirling motion created what they call sacred stones, right? They're the size of a cannonball. And this Thunderbird egg was created by a waterfall. And we also have those little round grandfather stones that we use to tie our drum. And each stone represents one of our sacred teachings. And so these stones are all connected. The little grandfather teachings we use, the Thunderbird egg, and the sacred stone, it should go into the Cannonball River. And everyone just said, yes, that's what we'll do. And so it was about 5 o'clock, just, it was like this time of year. And so it was getting dark quickly, and Josephine was using a walker then. And, we went down there, we had to break a hole in the ice. And then she put that Thunderbird egg in the river. And the next day, I went and I distributed all the goods that we had brought, and we were getting ready to leave. And we were over at that Sacred Stones camp up on the bluff. And all of a sudden, about 4 o'clock, you could hear this big eruption come up. Everybody was in a big circle down there, and I don't know why, but they were all standing in a circle. And then there was this eruption because Obama made his announcement. I took out my phone and I texted Josephine, and I said, the Thunderbird egg did its magic. And, sometimes, like, we don't have to do these, these big things where you're changing the hearts and the minds of thousands of people. Sometimes it's just doing what you're supposed to do. And on those rocks, the sin, the water, they do the rest. And so I told them that story, and the man still said, but what do we do? And it's like, sometimes we don't have to do anything, like we have to do what one person can make a difference. And Josephine made that difference, of course, in many, many ways. But when she was given that, I won't put the whole story about that, but when she was given that, it came from Serpent River, Canada. She did what she was told to do, and she traveled from Thunder Bay to Standing Rock. And she told me about it, and I said, I'll meet you there, and I did. And so, while thousands of people were, doing whatever they were doing, this little thing was happening over here, and that's the magic, and that's what they don't understand, is that it's not how do we change people's minds. People can have all kinds of information. Look at COVID. We know, how it's transmitted, and yet there are people who refuse to wear a mask. We know, now how to stop it, and who will do that. So it's not, it's not just what's up here, but it's, but as artists, that's what we do, right? We tell the stories. We tell these stories. We catch those songs when they come to us, you know. We pull out the image from that wood. That's our that's our work. So it's been a pleasure being with all of you, and I really, really thank Mina for bringing us together.
I think Sharon said it for me. It's our work, and you know, it's in a way, it's not necessarily up to us to give the information. I mean, they can have tons of information, but we'll never understand. And that's very true. So we just have to go on doing the work that we do, because the work that we're doing it's bigger than us. You know, it's not even for us. We're just the you know, I guess part of the long vessel, you know, that's doing this. You know, it's greater than all of us. I don't know where these things come from, and the wonders that, you know, my friends and our relatives do. Is, to me, it's the work that they're doing, and the work that everyone here is doing is something that's so great that I have no words for it. I'm always blown away. I'm blown away by just the I don't even have the right words to articulate it, but the intention is the word I'm thinking of. The intention behind the work that everyone here is doing. I mean, from Mina and Miriam. I don't have the right name. Sorry, I can't see on my tiny little phone here. Marion and Mina and everyone who's facilitated this. Just in that is part of the work as well, and in the introductions to all of you, and now you are all my family too, and and I'm a fan of Lily's. I follow you on Instagram and love you. So your work for a couple of years now, and yeah. And so, and it's really, and as I said, Shanna and Kumahaili, just all treasures, and Kisol, just all treasures and just gifts, I feel. And for that, I'm grateful. And what that does is, in the words of Sharon, it fuels me to continue doing that good work,
This gathering and the previous gatherings that we've had is that source of water, that source of inspiration, right? That source of giving us the strength to move forward and to continue the work that we're doing, because we know that it's not just us alone. We all are carrying similar kuleana, similar responsibilities and privileges because of the knowledge that has been shared with us by our elders and our ancestors. So it's very nice to know and inspirational to know that I have sisters across the way who are carrying the similar works, intentions, and giving back to the community, which is really what this is about. It's about us continuing the cyclical work, right, that our grandparents was doing, and their grandparents was doing, and their grandparents was doing. So it's just passing it down to the next generation. And I think for me, what really hit me was when I became a mother as well. And I realized how important it was to maintain knowledge and to transfer knowledge to them so that they can know who they are and that they have their language and they are able to retell stories at a later date when I'm no longer on this earth. So mahalo anui, my deepest gratitude go out to all of you, and thank you for the time that we've shared. Aloha.
I'll just follow that up with, I think it really is, I have a grandson who I dragged around, he grew up in theater, and from the time he was, born, and today he's a director, and he's, and I watch him work, I can write something, right? And I think he said it one day, it was something like, it was the greatest compliment I ever had. He said, from grandma's pen to paper to our youth's mouths, magic happens. And I think he's the part of that magic that makes that happen, that takes that and directs the kids and the actors in such a way that, it becomes something so beautiful on stage. And so it's just really gratifying to see, my grandson, doing the work and working with young people, and we did a story. We worked with Spider Women this winter on a radio show called Town of Little Sagas, and it was really fun to to be able to work with them that way. And so I think it's saying the stories will live on and the songs will live on. We have songs that are ancient and they're still being sung today, and we still need to tell the stories that go with those songs. So I think that what we need is to be and we're going to do it anyway, but we need to have resources to tell the stories the way that we tell them. The way I write a play is never going to be like start in the beginning and then there's an arc and there's a because that that's not the way our stories are, and we need to be funded to tell our stories our way, the way that fits in our community, and how we bring people together. This Tree of Peace thing is so incredible, to get leaves from all over the United States, and then to to be able to share that message with people. So yeah, give us some Junya.
I wanna, really humbled to be here. I feel like a baby myself. And yeah, this is immensely humbling and providing me with a lot of gratitude to be here with the four of you. The last few years, I had some experiences that really embedded the understanding of how important our elders' knowledge is. And yeah, I'm really honored to be able to listen to all your stories and hear your wisdom. So, yakoke.
Thank you all. I can't stop smiling. Thank you so much, Sharon, Tammy, Martha, and Lily, for it's just an honor to have you be here and to be in the same space and hear these intergenerational sharing of stories is just incredible. And I just want to, on behalf of the CELC team, appreciate your vulnerability and just to be here to share these stories with us. And I do want to call upon Sharon's call for funding. Please follow these amazing artists' work. They work in many different fields, and look up their work, follow them on social media, send money, fund them, fund their work. I think resources are tangible resources are needed. And so I really want to push that call forward. But this is just 2020 we're saying goodbye to, and this is just like perfect way to end this. So just thank you so much for your time and your stories. A huge thank you to Lily, Sharon, Martha, and Tammy for generously sharing so much of their experiences and wisdom. Such a beautiful space was created through the sharing of their stories, and we feel so humbled to have been able to share this space with them. I would like to take this moment to thank the CELC core team for their support: Elisa Lyles-Zamponza, Deidre Montgomery, Micah Rosegrant, Marion Taylor-Brown, and particularly Joseph Kiesel, who managed the complex technological elements of this project. Finally, thank you to all of you who have joined us tonight, despite all that is happening around us. It is important that you are here, especially because of what is happening. We hope you found inspiration from this conversation. Please share it widely with your colleagues, friends, and family. We hope to see you all soon. Stay safe. There is an image of the CELC logo with a Black background and white writing that spells out Cultural Equity Learning Community. There are 4 diagonal lines to the left of the writing, also in white.